Hello again, I am Blunty, and it wasn't all that long ago that if you told me that this image that you were looking at right now came from the front-facing camera of a phone, I'd have called you a liar, because it does look quite a lot like the image I get out of the real camera I've got sitting up there, which is a Micro Four Thirds camera with a full-frame lens going through a focal reducer to give me a sort of full-frame look on a Micro Four Thirds sensor and give me the nice, background blur back there, despite being a fairly short focal length on the lens. And, when we're talking bokeh, which is the quality of the background blur and how much blur there is, it's a function of the lens focal length and the sensor size and all this. We could get very photographically nerdy about all this, and I'm quite willing to do that, but it's not really the point of this video, so I'm going to stop myself. But, one of the main reasons that we like real cameras, real interchangeable lens cameras to give us, lots of different focal length choices and primes and zooms and all that sort of stuff, and large sensors, and is because phones just can't do that stuff because they've got, very small lenses going to very, very small sensors, and that's just physically, it doesn't let them do that. But we have computational photography now. That's fake blur. Looks kind of real. Quite convincing. I mean, if I turn my head slightly, you can see, there we go, the my glasses frames there start to fade out in the background because the computational photography isn't quite sure that that's part of my head anymore. And yeah, I'm surprised that Apple still haven't figured that out with their computational photography stuff, because about 60% of people do wear corrective eyewear. So it seems like a fairly important thing to get their computational photography stuff to figure out how to work with glasses when they're doing the fake background blur. But this far longer than intended introduction to this video is all just in service of me saying I'm about to talk quite a lot about the iPhone 16 Pro cameras. Now, this isn't what I'd really call a camera review, at least not in how I used to do camera reviews. There's things I'm not going to drill down on much, and features I might not even mention. This is kind of more about how I, as a bloke who uses a camera as a work thing constantly, day in, day out, for a couple of decades now, it's a mission critical tool. And I'm also a photography hobbyist who shoots for the pure joy of it, and I've been doing that even longer. But on the tech side, the very first thing I immediately loved was the new 120 frames per second mode in full fat 4K video. I expected it to be somewhat of a limited gimmick, but no, it's a properly useful tool. Alongside being very stylistically pleasant, running this 120 FPS video at 25 FPS instead to give us that liquid smooth slow-mo we all love, don't we? It also helps with making handheld shots look even more stable, because our phones, of course, are very light these days, and physics dictates that means it's a lot easier to overcome inertia than, holding a larger, heavier, quote-unquote, real camera would be. So outside of any sensor shifting stabilization tech, which is pretty good on the phone, it's just often a jitterier image from handheld shots on phones because, well, they're just easy to shake more. That's physics. But you slow those jitters down from 120 to 25 and they can look very naturalistic in their own right as pleasantly smooth handheld footage. So yeah, as a tool for B-roll alone, this is epic. Also, the vast improvements to close-up and macro shooting is oh my. I was enamored instantly with just how well it handles now. I love shooting macro stuff, and it works really well on the iPhone 16 Pro. I've upgraded from the 11 Pro Max. That's a 5-year gap since I last upgraded. That's how good the 11 Pro Max was. It filled all my needs for 5 years. I didn't feel the need to upgrade yearly anymore. I used to upgrade yearly for my phone because, they were making bigger and bigger leaps as you go. But then they kind of slowed down, and people get on Apple's back about that. And, it's basically the same as last year's phone with a couple of extra features. Yeah, that's how progress works. You make a lot of advancements very quickly, and then you refine that. The same thing happened with cameras. For those of you who've been around my channel long enough, you'll know I used to do a lot of photography reviews, cameras and lenses and accessories and stuff, but there came a point where, pretty much every camera out there could do 4K 60 and things like that, and the amount of new and interesting things happening in cameras started to slow right down, and I kind of lost interest in covering them because there was very little new happening. Every new thing that came out was just a very small step forward, and the same thing happened to phones. It's just the natural progress of technology. So when people say, well, it's just the same as last year's phone, yeah, because not everyone upgrades every year, and that's kind of the point. But the joyful thing is, when you do upgrade from a 5-year-old phone to the new phone, ooh, it feels new. There's so much more power here. So yeah, let's just focus on the camera for now, and I'll show you what I've been shooting. I've got some night shots, some day shots, some video, and yeah, the short version is, before we even get to my conclusions, I feel like I'm going to be shooting a lot less on this when I can just slide this out of my pocket, because this is a fairly big and heavy camera. Love this camera. This is the Panasonic Lumix S1. Love this camera to bits. But I feel like the choice to take this with me and, extra lenses and stuff is going to be much, much harder, because the things this can do with its new sensors, with its new lenses, and in particular with its computational photography stuff, to fake the kind of things I would normally want this to do, it's a whole different ballgame. I'm telling you, if I hadn't shot these my very own self and just showed them to me, there's more than a few images here you could easily convince me were taken on big boy camera gear here. Oh, you can zoom right in and pixel peep and see the seams and the stitches of how all this techno sorcery is achieved, if you know what you're looking for. But let's face the reality of this. Almost everything a regular person or even a serious photo hobbyist ever shoots these days is viewed on other phones with little screens, or maybe a 27 or 34-inch monitor on someone's desk at best. Very few people are looking at them on bigger screens than that, and even fewer are, printing them out gallery-sized or something. And no one but the most anally retentive people you avoid at all costs at social gatherings lest they trap you in an achingly specific mansplaining session masquerading as a conversation would ever bother pixel peeping to that extent. So all I'm doing when I shoot, especially with my phone, is looking for an image, pretty enough, nice enough, pleasant enough, interesting enough to make someone stop scrolling for 30 to 90 seconds to, appreciate it. And between the marvelous flexibility I get from the lens choices here and the right out of camera results, which 99% of what I'm showing you here is just right out of camera, it's really rewarding to shoot with the iPhone 16 Pro. And as I started out with in this video, even when it's faking that shallow depth of field, it's usually anywhere from relatively to remarkably convincing. And the best part is, none of this is even baked into the file. You can alter it after the fact if you don't like how it came out for more or less effect, or none. I mean, look at this one. Easily my favorite selfie yet. And yes, I deliberately overcooked the editing on the one I uploaded. That's way too much. That was kind of the point I was driving at there. But those bokeh balls in the background there, Apple have paid so much attention to how this is faked. They even have haloing and barrel distortion at the edge of the frame. It is a very convincing effect under some circumstances, especially, as people are scrolling through socials and not looking too closely at, the edges and the seams and whatnot. Video though, also remarkable what can be done right out of camera, either in standard shooting mode or the so-called cinematic mode, and this is my first experience with cinematic mode. The 11 Pro Max I upgraded from couldn't do it, but it emphasizes the background blur and object tracking for focus, and goodness me, it works really well, like shockingly well. My big boy camera, my fave, that Panasonic S1. Panasonic are kind of notorious for their one big weakness being continuous focus in video and object tracking for focus and things like that. But this little iPhone that slides into my pocket puts it to shame on that score. Hell, I've seen Sony cameras do worse with focus tracking, and Sony are the best at it in, the so-called real cameras. I'm not going to gush about everything. It's not all perfect across the board. In 2x zoom, especially in extreme contrast places, for example, like this sunlight glinting off this dark duck pond, you'll see a lot of purple haloing, which is frankly kind of unpleasant. And the last time I saw that was on a lens that cost like $12 or something. and with point light sources, especially more than one, the lens flare is some of the least pleasant I've had on a phone, and it's all of the lenses too, not just sort of one or two of the lenses, but all of them suffer from this. A pity, but also not something that's a constant issue. You can work around it or even work with it if you like. I just wish it was a bit better handled. I like lens flare when it's nice looking, but this is not nice looking lens flare, unfortunately. I was also pleasantly shocked how clean even 4K 60 FPS was in extremely low light conditions. But, as you may expect, 4K 120 is rather less useful in those exact same very dark conditions. Which, again, an extreme edge case for, practical concerns, but worth knowing about so you can plan a shot properly. Outside of that, the fact you can't use the ultra-wide or the telephoto lens in that 4K 120 FPS mode is a bit of a bummer, but that's because only the main camera sensor has a readout fast enough to do that job. But even with those things, it's properly amazing how few limits there are for iPhone shooting now. I mean, when you're shooting on an iPhone, you always feel limited somehow because it is a compromised device. It's not a proper full-on camera. It hasn't been designed from the ground up to be an camera. But, oh my God, the number of limits you have in place these days with how this works, it's lovely how far it's all come, isn't it? And I'm talking even for great-looking two-camera pieces. Check this out, for example. The most ridiculously challenging shot I could set up. I've got the friggin' sunrise behind me, for crying out loud. Zero clouds in the sky, so it's the harshest, brightest possible backlighting. No fill light. I didn't bring any other lights with me. And the iPhone is just handling the exposure and dynamic range remarkably well. I mean, I didn't even have to fiddle with it. This is just what the camera does automatically. I could fine tune this. I could do a little exposure compensation or something, but this is just straight out of the camera. And it's so usable. And what's more, and again, except for the issue with my glasses, that so-called, cinematic mode and the faked background blur is still really nice. Again, you'll find the clues to its fakeness. If you look close, you can tell. But to a casual viewer, and for a quick shot that would otherwise be impossible or just not nearly as aesthetically nice, being able to do this kind of stuff just on my phone at an instant's notice is something of a truly properly game-changing option. So yeah, that's that. I won't be getting rid of this anytime soon. You'll pry this from my cold dead hands, as it were, because this is a really lovely camera. I love using it. I can put all kinds of different lenses on there. It's got a lot of power. It's all, you know, mechanical buttons and dials that I can just quickly get to with muscle memory. It's a lot less fiddly than trying to do stuff on the touch screen. And when I shoot with this, it's with a very deliberate intent quite often to go into editing and then do specific things with it. When you shoot on a phone, less about that. It's much more run and gun. A lot of the stuff I do with the phone is straight out of the phone because it just spits out images that look fine, particularly when it comes to video. I'll do a little light editing on photos when I post them on social media and things like that sometimes. But by and large, the kind of things I can do with this now and the presentation I can get out of it for even, you know, YouTube videos and, you know, the professional work and whatever, is to a level that there are certain things that I just don't need this for anymore. Need is different to want, but being able to get away with the camera that I've got in my pocket when I'm out and about and something happens or an opportunity presents itself and I go, oh, I wish I'd bought my real camera. The strength of that wish has been reduced because the things I can get this thing to do for me now and the presentation I can get out of it is much closer. So there's less lament about not always dragging this around with me when I go to things and stuff. So yeah, very happy with the new cameras on the iPhone 16 Pro. This is the short version of this video, I guess. Thanks for watching. I am Bloody. I will catch you next time. And yeah, if you've got a new phone in your pocket, iPhone or otherwise, let me know how you're going with it. Having fun? I'm having fun. Thanks to the patrons, of course, by the way.